Hi, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to a really special edition of Into the Aether. Tonight, we're opening the door to a conversation that so many of us quietly circle around, the shadow self. Not the spooky version, not the melodramatic version, but the real, human, everyday truth of the parts of us that feel hidden, tender, or inconvenient. Sorry, this touches me deeply because I have been inconvenient a lot in my life. And to explore it with us, we have someone extraordinary, Dr. Pamela Stoodley. She's one of those rare people who bridges worlds effortlessly. She's a medical doctor, an addictions and developmental psychologist, certified in behavioral and cognitive neurology, trained in brain health, nutrition. I don't know if I'm going to say this right. Psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology. Thank you. And then, because that apparently wasn't enough, she became a certified yoga instructor, a neuromeditation coach, a bioenergetics practitioner, and a Reiki practitioner. She brings science, embodiment, intuition, and compassion together in a way that just makes the whole room exhale. And she's also the author of Cracking the Happiness Code, which we'll be shamelessly plugging tonight because it's brilliant and everyone should read it. So settle in. We're not doing readings tonight. This episode is a spacious, reflective discussion about what shadow work really is, why it matters, how to meet it safely, and how to honor the parts of ourselves we usually avoid. Let's begin. Welcome, Dr. Pamela Stoodley.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Thank you so much. And I am so excited to be here. I know it was a couple of weeks or a month ago when I just simply randomly chatted and said, I'm here to help. I can come on. And here we are. So very great.
Oh, we are grateful. I recall that moment clearly. I think we were doing the boundaries episode during that time.
Yes. Yeah, it was during the boundaries episodes. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the burning question and then and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah.
So what exactly? I mean, when people hear shadow work, they think everything from trauma to Jungian archetypes to TikTok chaos. What does shadow actually mean from your perspective?
So one of the things that, as you rightly mentioned, I like doing is talking about spirituality. For me, spirituality mostly stems from ancient wisdom, and then bringing on the science. I come from a culture where both were very heavily used, but in a very confused way. And because there was confusion, one was given more weightage than the other. And when I say one was given more weightage, the other was actually rubbished. It was looked at as woo. It was looked at as people just talking crazy talk to live in a delusional world. And so when you bring on words like shadow, a lot of people get bifurcated in their opinions. One group of people are bah humbug, that's all rubbish. And the others are, you just out there to try and scare people with your esoteric definitions.
Yes.
So over a period of time, I studied psychology because medicine did not cover what it is that psychology does in understanding the human psyche really. And whatever I knew from ancient wisdom, just my love for ancient wisdom, I started seeing the parallels. And what I noticed is the concept was the same, the language was different. And And language can be different, is what I thought, is because we all speak a different language and there's a possibility for miscommunication in just everyday speak. So imagine when we're taking two worlds that have very different language and we try to bring them together, and people are either all up and about proof, or I don't understand that, or I might be ostracized if I say I'm a spiritual person. So for me, shadow work is something that I would say, from a scientific perspective or psychological perspective, areas of ourself that we are born with that are deeply rooted in our subconscious. And those areas create patterns. And those patterns create our thoughts, our behaviors, and our outcome. And the outcome obviously stems from the actions that we do as a result. So in a way, shadows shape our beliefs and our personality. And that is why a lot of people refuse to touch it with a 10-foot pole, because they don't want to confront stuff about themselves. I mean, who wants to hear bad stuff about, especially when you have to look in the mirror and tell that about yourself, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something interesting, Dr. Pam, that we are born with shadows. Is it possible for us to like develop shadows? Like it's not inborn?
So if I, one of the analogies that I usually like to give I wouldn't call them patients, clients. What I tell my clients is that look at shadow as the other side of the coin. One cannot exist without the other. If you are standing in a room which is completely pitch dark, then let's use that analogy of your non-existence, right? The very fact that you're existing is light.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're existing and you're in the light, you automatically have a shadow. So you cannot separate the two. The entities are just one. They are dual in nature, but the duality is so intermingled that to me it's one. So if I have to talk about it from a scientific perspective, we are born with various aspects to ourselves, whether that be wiring while we were in our mother's wombs, or genetic imprints from our generational trauma that's already imprinted in our genes. Whatever it is, we're already born with the shadow because we're born with the lights. The only time we are devoid of shadows is when we have no light, which is when we don't exist. And so when people talk about the formation because of certain events that they might have gone through, that is not shadow forming.
Mm-hmm.
That actually highlights the shadow, which I can talk about at a later time. Yeah.
Interesting. So thank you for that. And also, I just want to say a quick hi to our viewers.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. We can't get through everyone right now. But if you have any questions about shadow work, please feel free to type them in the chat. We are going to accept questions, but as long as they are related to shadows, again, we won't be doing readings for today, but we will be accepting questions about shadow and shadow work. So I find it very interesting, Dr. Pam, the way you discuss it, because as you said, there are parallels to spirituality and in psychology. Like in spirituality, my guides call it like soul retrieval. But the way they explain it to me is that soul isn't fragmented. So it makes sense for me, like when you say that the shadow and the light are just two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
Because for me, working with spirit on the spiritual side and energy work, it sounds the same. Like we are just one. There are just sides of us that we don't see and we try to hide. So from your experience, why do we hide our shadows?
I think the first step, if I were to take one step back, is that a lot of people don't even know they have shadows.
Mm.
You know, a lot of people think, and this is very reflective in their behavior, their thought process. They will use statements like, I'm an adult now. This is how I am. Take it or leave it. It is what it is, you know? And or there are a lot of people who go, this is my fate. And my parents were like this. My whole generation was like this, so I am like this. And scientifically, also, this has been busted. This has been shown that there is something called as genetics, but there's also something called as epigenetics.
Mhm.
So, from a spiritual perspective, if we talk about karma and we talk about souls and we talk about energy, and then we talk about how we can work with our shadow to change an outcome that's not fitting for our purpose. The exact same thing is talked about from a scientific perspective, where we say you feel stuck in a loop, you
Mhm.
rewire your thought process because we can show
Okay.
you what rewiring looks like. If you think that your parents had high blood pressure and diabetes, you're not destined to have it. You have a
Mhm.
higher propensity, there's higher potential, but if you're aware of that, you change your lifestyle and the epigenetic switch just gets turned off and you do not have to, you can break that cycle. You do not have to carry on that for the next generations. You can be that pattern breaker where 3 generations down the line, should you choose to have offsprings and they choose to have offsprings, they look back and go, but my great grandparents, they broke that chain of having high blood pressure and diabetes. So I now come from a line that doesn't have high blood pressure and diabetes. So that's a parallel.
I love that. That feels very powerful for me. That because a
Yeah.
lot of people that who we work with, our clients and even the chatters, some of them feel stuck. Like, oh, I can't get out of this. And you mentioned something very interesting, like rewiring the brain. So,
Yes.
and we are also going to talk about shadow work. Are those two things connected?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Um, so, one of the things that I am even trying to change in the scientific community is I, I keep them as three separate entities.
Hmm.
People relate the mind to the brain. I don't. For me, the mind is an entity in and of itself.
Hmm.
So we have the brain and we have the body. The mind is in the brain, but the mind is also in the body. Your body has a mind of its own because it has memory. The
Yes.
cells in your body has memory.
Hmm.
The organs in your body have memory.
Hmm.
And so when we say, you know, a lot of people say your gut is your second brain, which is actually wrong. Your gut isn't your second brain. The reason why they're saying it's your second brain is because they think the qualities of the brain, which is like memory and stuff like that, pertains to the brain. What they should actually say is your gut has a mind of its own. Now, when you look at it from that perspective, gut instinct, interoception makes more sense. So, if we are talking about rewiring, the reason why I keep rewiring to the brain is because neurons are more like wires. So we say rewiring, but that's not the only thing that needs healing in shadow work. The body's release is also another very huge aspect because trauma is stored everywhere in your brain, in your body, everywhere. So when we talk about rewiring, that's the thought process that needs changing, but we also need a body restructure, energetic restructure. That's why people go for energy healing,
Hmm.
or they talk about certain areas in their body that's blocked. So it's a mix of both.
Interesting.
That's
Very interesting. Dr.
that's
Pam,
really
you
sorry. That's
Linda? Go,
no,
Linda.
go ahead, Linda.
that's really fascinating. But you know what? I'm kind of still stuck on your statement that but before I go on, I want to say I am picking out your questions from questions from the audience, from our chatters. We have not forgotten you, okay? I just have this burning question in my heart. So it's me first, sorry.
Yes. Host privileges.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of, I have never heard anyone say that we're born with shadows, that they are innate in us as human beings.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit more about that, please?
Sure.
What kind of shadows are they that we're born with?
It depends. It depends what kind of light you were born with. So if you were born with a little candle light, you'll have a shadow that pertains to that. If you were born in an environment, in a generation, in a household that had floodlights, I'm not saying that your shadow will equally match that, but the quality will be very different from someone else who was born with a metaphorical candlelight. How does this translate into everyday life? Two scenarios. A person with, let's call person A and person B. Person A born in a war zone country. Let's talk about Holocaust survivors. Whatever they went through the wars, generations later, let's talk about their offsprings. Their offsprings were born with shadows that come to them innately because of the generational imprint that has happened to them. Whatever their parents, grandparents, and whatever these survivors went through, how does that look like in today's generation of the Holocaust survivors' offsprings? Physiologically, they have more propensity to anxiety, cancer, high blood pressure. And they have very high levels of stress, like off the charts. A lot of them would say it's inexplicable and an irrational fear of something. It's irrational to them because in their lifetime, they haven't been subjected to an event that explains this intensity of fear. However, scientifically, if we track it back, we know where that stems from. And I think probably it was the same chat where we were talking about boundaries or maybe some other, and I talked about the cherry blossom experiment. And you, Linda, read that, where the cherry blossom scent was used along with mild electrocution for a generation of rats. And then over a period of time, they did not have to use the electrocution. They just used the scent, and the mice were fearful. And then they let them breed for 2 generations and 3 generations. And they saw that that fear, without doing anything, was just there. The minute the offspring smelt it, they had the fear. If you talk about person B, who did not have any war zone kind of an environment, but had probably a very authoritarian parenting environment where the parents and their grandparents raised them in a very authoritarian way. This person, type person B, is born with different types of shadows. This person is born with shadows of whatever the mother would have experienced from an authoritarian perspective while the child was in the womb. That could be not speaking up, or being subdued and suppressed, or a people-pleasing manner in which he has to say yes to the whole in-laws and whatever the scenario. So you grow up with that already embedded, and then nurture and nature play a role in intensifying your shadows. So think of it as a blueprint that you're born with, genetically speaking, mentally speaking, psychologically speaking, spiritually speaking. And so it's not something we can safely say, at least I haven't seen anyone who can ever say, I have no shadows. Because right when you say that, that's a reflection to me that there is something you're denying, which is a very heavy speak on shadow itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's really interesting. All right. And I think you're speaking of epigenetics here.
Yes.
And how those, because I didn't read the study itself. I'm not that, I'm not that crazy, but I read about the study of the survivors of the Dutch famine during World War II, and their children, and the kinds of problems their children are experiencing, and their grandchildren as well, just because of their mothers being pregnant during a famine. And it's really extraordinary the kind of information that came out about that. And I see there was a question in our chat about if this, just a second while I find it. Sorry, just give me a moment here, because it was an excellent question. Where does ancestral trauma fit in here? And this individual is speaking about what we talk about in the woo-woo circles, about we talk about it on a spiritual level. We don't talk about it on a on a genetic level, like on how it actually changes your DNA. It adds little bits to your DNA. That's what epigenetics is, people. When you go through your life, and especially if it's a traumatic experience, little bits are added onto your DNA that get transmitted to your children. Okay, so a mother who's being abused during pregnancy may have a very anxious child, or, I mean, you can think of different scenarios on your own, I'm sure, but that's how the ancestral trauma that we deal with our chatters and with our clients is it's, we don't talk to them about the genetics, the genetic origins, or the potential genetic origins, or the familial origins, or anything. We deal with it strict. I don't mean we cut their heads off. I mean, we deal with it strictly on a non-physical level, and yet on an energetic level, I should say. And yet people report back that they feel relief.
Yes.
That fascinates me.
If I were to talk about an example of an ancestral trauma, let's say that we come from a generation that I'll give you an example of my patient. And this is a very generic example, so I'm sure many can relate with this. Excuse me. For years now, this particular client of mine had seen their grandmother go through a very mild form of abuse, in her words, or my client's words, but abuse enough to understand that they come from a family dynamic where the wife needs to please the husband. It's the imbalance between the masculine and the feminine, because the father or the husband or the man of the household is looked at as being the supreme being, and then the wife is meant to serve, this subservient kind of a generational thing that we've seen in the 60s or prior to that, right? And so what happened as a result is they had a daughter, my client's mom, who was raised with those kind of values and beliefs that when you go out and get married, these are the things you need to learn. Never talk back to your husband. Learn to keep him happy. Serve him so that he doesn't abandon you. And also things like, don't do anything wrong, whatever that means in today's world. Don't do anything wrong, because if they were to leave you, society will look down on you and us because we cannot take you back into the house. So this kind of programming is in itself, let's call it a mild form of trauma, a mild for whoever looks at it. It's quite traumatic for someone who's going through these events. Do remind me, though, on the subject of trauma, I would really like to talk about what trauma really is. And we'll come back to that, because that itself opens up many doors of changing one's perception. So my client then looks back at the way her mother was raised. And my client, growing up as a woman, did not like that. She was very little, and she saw the way her mum was serving her father. She became a rebellious toddler, a rebellious teenager. And as a result, she had her own shadows now. But what she thought is she is not her mother. So her struggles are not her mother's struggles. They had a disconnect. They didn't understand each other. And she became very anti-traditional according to her family beliefs and values. Now, if anybody looks at it from the outside, they would clearly see the pattern that the grandmother and the mother went through, and the manifestation, which is how does the behavior look when you have those kind of people-pleasing shadows, not being able to speak up shadows, suppressing your emotion shadows. The manifestation of that was suppressing everything, having diseases, physiologically being affected, inflammation in the body, chronic blood pressure, diabetes, all these kind of things. The daughter, when she came to me, she thought she wouldn't have those because she doesn't have those shadows. However, her behavior, what I pointed out to her, is that it was the other end of the spectrum. It was I am not that person, so I don't have those issues, therefore I have no shadows. And I had to point to her that as a result, she was developing a very hardened exterior. So her shadows were not showing the nurturing side of her. Her relationships were being affected because she wasn't being vulnerable enough, because in her eyes, vulnerability meant mimicking the mother, because there was no balance. She had no balance to know that if I show a little bit of sensitivity, that's okay and that's needed. In her eyes, sensitivity and vulnerability meant being subservient, and I don't want to be that. Therefore, I need to be hard. What did harden do? Harden made her despise things, intolerable towards things. When she felt something wasn't fitting right within her, because of her own behavior, she would have some sort of solace in the form of numbing her emotions. So you can understand where that would lead her to addictions. And so her own shadows created a whole set of problems for her, yet she was in denial because she thought she's nothing like her mother and her grandmother. So then why is she going through what she's going through? But it's the same ancestral trauma that manifested in 2 different generations in 2 different ways.
That's utterly fascinating to me.
It really is.
It really is. And as you were speaking, I recognized examples from the people that I know and from my own life, frankly, of I don't want to be like that. And yet being like that still means that you're shaping yourself around this, right?
Yes. Because you're coping to not be like that. Your benchmark is what people tend to forget is there is a spectrum, and each spectrum has an end. One end isn't the opposite, it's exactly the opposite of the other end. But when you don't want to be one end, you
Then
don't
you
look
have
at the
to be
other
the
end. Yes, but you don't look at that as the other end. You have to look at the center. You have to look at the balance. You have to look at the alignment. And that is where shadow work is very important, because you have no reference point.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
fascinating.
it is absolutely fascinating. Can you tell us Well, you came with some questions yourself.
Yes, I
So
was just about to look and ask you when
when's my turn?
because I have been I was born in a religious family, being Catholic, but over a period of
Oh,
time,
my
I
heart.
understand.
All of us are like born and raised Catholics, everyone.
Yeah.
Just for context, all of us, all three
Yeah.
of us.
And I went to school. I went to convent school. So as a
Oh,
boarder.
me too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you too. Oh my God.
But
I went to Catholic school.
my convent school allowed intermixing of genders, so we were boys and girls. Yes, we were the modern kind of convent school. But having said that, I had a lot of religious questions which were frowned upon. The fact that I was asking these questions, it was frowned upon. So I detached myself from religion per se, but I found myself again being this bridger that I am. I understand how religion and spirituality can connect, but how one gets taken over to an extreme that puts people off. So I see that. And so I'm like a newbie at spirituality. And I thought, I need to ask Linda and Diane, when when you do these readings and you do the Akashic records and you read the tarot cards, when you tune into someone intuitively, can you actually sense their shadow? And if you can, what does it look like? Or because you're intuitively tapping into it, what do you feel? Do you feel anything?
Diane, you go ahead. You go first.
So I work on energy healing. I'm an energy healer, and for me, how I see shadows, they're not like actual people. Although sometimes they are shown to us as actual people, just to personify the shadow.
Yeah.
That happened during our last episode about 2 weeks ago. I was surprised to see that the Akashic Records masters were showing me like persons, the past versions and past aspects of people. So it's possible to see them, but most commonly, I see shadows in the energy body. It's interesting to me that you mentioned, Dr. Pam, that people feel like things in the different parts of their body. Because for me, like energy work and seeing shadows work like that, I see that whenever there is a shadow that is affecting the current self, it is reflected within our chakras. Like for example, one of our chakras is blocked, like, and then we look for things that's blocking it, and it's from a past memory, whether it's from this lifetime or from past lifetime. So personally, most often I don't see them as shadows themselves, but as reflections through our energy body.
So
How about you, Melinda?
it's sort of like if you're driving the car, you cannot see the speed, but a representation of the speed on the odometer of the car. So you're seeing a representation of their shadow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have the same experience as I think every reader is different
Okay.
potentially. I mean, I'm not sure about that because I don't know every reader, but for me, I don't see a shadow at all. When I see grief within someone, I say you have a great deal of grief within you. It's too much for you to cope with all at once. For example, um, allow yourself 15 minutes a day to wail and gnash your teeth and cry and just sob, and then allow it to flow through you. And when it comes up, allow it to flow through you, um, which is the guidance. I mean, I'm just repeating the guidance that I'm given. This isn't coming from me, but I'm thinking of one specific reading that I did about this. um, I don't see separate anything when I tune into someone's energy. I see um, all kinds of different things. I see images, potentially from their childhood, which I won't know until I confirm with them. Sometimes I see um, um, I can feel the emotion. Sometimes words fall in, sometimes, but I have never seen a shadow. I have never sensed a separateness within someone, you know, like a denial. I've never sensed that so far, which, okay, so maybe I just need to practice more. But what I perceive is like a whole complicated, riotous colors of a human being. I don't see anything that's separate from them.
It makes sense though, because for me, if life is light, then shadow is so heavily integrated with me that if I were to find a microscope to dissect it, I wouldn't be able to, because taking out a shadow is taking out a piece of me.
Yeah,
You know?
and interesting that you bring that up, because you know what? Here's a question from Pam and in our audience, who says, is the goal in shadow work to no longer have any shadows? Is it possible to have no shadow after much work? And the reason that this question kind of nags at me a little bit is because that means that you think that shadow is a bad thing,
Yes.
you know, and that the whole point is to get rid of it. I don't myself, this is just me. I'm not talking to the guides or anything here. This is just me. I think the shadow is us. I think that it's not something that we need to get rid of. It's part of our strength as women, especially, but as just human beings all around. It's part of our strength. It's part of what we bring into this world that helps us cope, however
Yeah.
that appears. Now, if you're coping in an unbalanced or unhealthy way, well, yeah, then you need to, figure it out and make some adjustments. But really, that's not the shadow's fault, and the shadow is not a bad thing. That's just my opinion.
No,
I think
I completely agree, but I'll give the scientific after Diana's given her take.
okay. Because I think that's why they are called shadows anyway. Because shadows are the parts of us, the aspects of us who we judge. So sometimes we think, oh, this part of us is bad, this part of us is needy, this part of us is jealous, and we judge them so much that we hide them. It's similar to what you were saying a while ago about the ancestral trauma, Dr. Pam. Because the person, your client, was actually pushing away that part of her that is connected with her family, because she feels like it's very shameful to serve someone. So that person might be judging that part of themselves, but that part of us is still a part of us. Like when we're doing our work in the Akashic records, my guides call it soul retrieval. But when I asked them about it, they told me that it's just accepting parts of ourselves and giving that part of ourselves love, unconditional love, especially.
because because those parts of ourselves have information for us. They
Yes.
provide us with important information about our environment and the people in it. Okay, so they can help us a lot. And saying, no, I won't be jealous. Well, honey, maybe he is cheating.
Yes.
Like, don't force yourself to a false trust in order to not be jealous. Like, that's not the point of shadow work.
If I go back to Pam's question with an analogy, give an answer. Um, a- if I were to give an example of a very common shadow that a lot of people can resonate with, is this aspect of anger. And talking about anger as an emotion, right?
Yeah.
I am teaching this to people in the scientific community too. So I can very well understand how people who do not have a very high scientific background, or people who struggle with their parenting skills and with children and failure to understand that, is what are emotions exactly? Emotions are something felt physiologically. You cannot control them. You cannot control emotions. They happen in your body.
Mm-hmm.
What you can manipulate and express are feelings. Feelings happen in your brain. Feelings are the label you give the emotion.
Yes.
So, say, for example, someone is experiencing anger. What does anger in the body look like? Heart rate is increased, blood is pumping a lot, your face may turn red or whatever. You feel a sense of warmth or heat on the surface of your skin, in your face. Your gut may feel clenched, or you might feel like there's a cramping going on. Palms could be sweaty. Your focus could get very narrow, many different ways, but these are some simple physiological things. Everyone experiences anger, but not everyone regulates anger.
Hallelujah.
And
Praise
that
the
is
Lord.
that is the problem, and that is why I teach people, is that your aim, just like the question about the shadow, your aim is not to never feel anger again, because you are taking a very important signal your body is telling you and trying to say, I want to eliminate this messaging. Because if someone were to come and attack you or your loved one, you don't want the emotion of happiness in your body. You don't want the emotion of something else. It's the anger that will cause the adrenaline rush that will make you take appropriate action for survival. If you are out in the forest and people say, I never want to fear things, fear makes me paralyzed. Well, it's not the fear that makes you paralyzed. It's the meaning you are giving the fear that's paralyzing you. Because imagine, just like I never want to feel anger again, you never want to feel fear again. And this happens. People who have a brain pathology, or people who have been in an accident and have a brain injury, parts of their brain does not let them feel fear. So can you imagine when they're actually faced with a threat and they don't feel fear? That's dangerous, because they'll just be laughing in the face of the threat, not knowing that they're putting themselves in danger. So the aim is to not look at emotions. I don't call them, people call them positive and negative emotions. I said, you are already putting them in baskets, making them feel, I accept these emotions, I don't accept these emotions. Call them pleasant and unpleasant. They should exist, but they don't make you feel pleasant. And they don't make you, sometimes they make you feel pleasant. Some emotions make you feel unpleasant, given the time of day, given the scenario, given the context. If at a funeral, you were for some reason laughing and you couldn't bring on empathy, happiness there then is actually an unpleasant emotion because it's not appropriate to the scenario. So positive and negative is very out the door, because it's creating that bifurcation in your head. What is good? What is bad? And the same thing with shadows. So no, you don't want to get rid of shadows. That's not the aim. Just like you don't want to get rid of emotions. You want to be able to work with them. You want to be able to accept them, and you want to be able to learn from them. Because just like a relapse in anything, you work on your shadows and you are able to heal them. There can be circumstances in the future that may make you feel like you've relapsed. And you've relapsed in a very different way. But because you've healed yourself, you don't have to go right to the drawing board and pick up from there. You might have to pick up 20 steps later and do a little bit more work. So, yeah.
So, Dr. Pam, you're talking about healing the shadow. Is that what shadow work is? Because we always often and we just always hear shadow work, shadow work. What does it mean?
Yes. So, shadow work. Okay, I know I said let me talk about trauma first, just so I can explain. A lot of people think something that happens, and they even say this, and again, we're teaching the whole scientific community, because if anybody's heard about Dr. Gabor Mate, that's one of the people that I really love and admire.
Yes.
He talks about trauma as, which makes logical sense. Trauma isn't something that happened to you. Trauma is something that comes out of how your body processed that event. That's why if one event has happened to two different people, the two different people, depending on their shadows, depending on their capacity, depending on their ability, depending on their values, beliefs, and wiring, come out of that event with two separate outcomes. One person comes out unfazed, the other person becomes traumatized. So the event isn't the trauma. How you processed, how your body processed it, leaves you traumatized or not traumatized. So, in saying, talking about trauma, and then we talk about shadows, how do the two fit? Because a lot of people ask me, can trauma give rise to shadows? They don't. Think of a plane and you are at the foundational level. You've got shadow and light interspersed. If you have a particular event, and that event, depending on your wiring, your capability, you did not metabolize or process it really well, that event creates a form of trauma, which now goes and hooks into one of your shadows. It sits on top of it, it layers.
Ah.
So
That
then what
makes
happens is,
sense.
so then what happens is that trauma sort of shines the torch on your shadow and brings it to the surface. Other people think, oh, okay, I've had this traumatic experience, and as a result, look at what's happening in my life. But actually, what's happening is your shadows come up to the surface and it's screaming, pay attention, we need inner work. Inner work needs to be done. Those who talk about surface level, when I say surface level, I mean thinking of, reading a few books or watching some YouTube and being a bit aware of things like that. That's surface level. That's not real work. That's awareness, which is very important because you can't do the work of something you're not aware that needs work. So when you're talking about awareness and you're reading, consuming stuff, that's surface level. That's fine. Some people don't get to the surface level. Some people start coping with trauma with other stuff, substance abuse and risky behavior, or not wanting to exist anymore because they can't take the pain of it. So when you peel off the surface level, you go to the traumatic level, the level where the trauma hooked into the shadow. And this is the level where, again, depending on your capacity, your ability, your values, your beliefs, you're able to do it by yourself or with the help of an expert. And sometimes it can be a synergy. The expert can be a very good friend who's having the right intention, the right knowledge, and can help you, and or a therapist, a counselor, any of those things. So that's the traumatic layer. But then you shouldn't stop there. It's because the traumatic layer hooked into the shadow, you go deeper. And then you do the shadow work, which is understand, why did this event cause me to not process it and as a result left me traumatized? What was it about me that could not process this event like somebody else did? This is not a comparison to what somebody else could do, would do, should do, because we're all different. But the minute you are left traumatized, it tells you that there is something that the trauma went and hooked into. That's what the shadow work is all about.
Oh, fascinating.
This
So
is, sorry, go ahead.
you touched on something interesting. You mentioned that, like, part of it is unhooking that traumatic event through the help of a professional. So is it something that we can do on our own, or is it very necessary that we ask for a professional for help?
It completely depends on your blueprint, how you're shaped, what are your values, what are your beliefs. A lot of people who are very, okay, maybe this is a bit of a story time, but before I get into a story of my own personal experience, we could take some questions so that I can then give you a bit of a story to put all of this into a picture.
Okay, but before we do that, I want to shamelessly plug your book once more. It's called Cracking the Happiness Code. It's by Dr. Pamela Stoodley, who's with us today. We are honored to have her. And it's available on Amazon, and it's also available on Kindle for all of you people who live far away from a decent bookstore. And I strongly encourage you to read it. So, Cracking the Happiness Code, available, and please, please go out and get it. And I'm not even going to say purchase responsibly.
Purchasing is responsible in this case.
In this case, purchasing is responsible. It will be very helpful. And yeah, let's go to some of the questions that we have in the chat. There, we've got a lot of them starred. I'm just going to go through. This is just a comment. Smith. It's Jeremy. He says, I always think of Billy Joel's song "The Stranger" when I think about the shadow. You may never understand how the stranger is inspired, but he's not always evil and he's not always wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Good insight there, Jeremy. And someone wants to know, KTS Worker wants to know, what do you think, Dr. Pam, about the possibility that we have 34 senses? I have never heard of this. This is
Dr. This is a neuroscientist. I think her name is Tara Schwartz. Who talks about it in one of the podcasts, I think. It was just a random short. Look, the way people put numbers and labels and diagnosis, I'm very wary of such things. Not saying that something is right or wrong. What I am saying is we have senses, multiple senses. Is the poignant focus on the number, or what can these senses do for us?
Yeah.
Today, science discovered 34. Tomorrow, they might discover 100. So what? But what are you doing with the senses that you have? We had interoception for a very long time. People knew about it. People probably called it gut instinct. Now the focus about gut instinct is coming out so much that we are, making it a big deal, but it existed since we were born, because we had guts and we knew about these vibes, or we would walk down an alleyway and say that, I have a very bad vibe about this place, or whatever. You call them vibrations, you call them frequencies, you call it third eye knowing, gut instincts, whatever it may be. Or from a scientific language, an umbrella term that's given to everything is interoception, understanding the body's biofeedback signals. What is your body talking to you? So I think, not that I want to shun it, but it's easy to get lost into the irrelevance of it. I would say, whatever it is, learn to make it work in your favor, whatever it's called. Because we often get stuck with labels and then we go down a different rabbit hole, which makes no sense. So,
thank you. Thank you for that. And now, just to make it all fair and everything, we're going to take another question from you, if you have one.
Yes. I know we talked about where or how you perceive shadows. What I wanted to know is when you talk about shadow in the aura or areas that are vibrating with lower frequency or energy or something of that sort. What is your understanding of how does that parallel with shadows, or from a very spiritual perspective?
From an energetic perspective, usually we see those things as signs that the shadow is telling us that, hey, I want to get noticed. And it's part of that noticing thing and self-awareness that allows us to heal those shadows. Like, for example, like the heart is blocked. I see that the heart chakra is blocked. So when we go into the Akashic records, we find out that the person is holding on to grief, or they're not forgiving someone. So there is a part of them that they are shunning. For example, in that example of grief, they don't want to grieve, or there is a part of them that they judge because they see grieving as a weakness. They need to look like a very strong person in front of the other. So they are shunning, or they are ignoring that part of them who doesn't want to grieve. So in that sense, that's how it appears to me through energy work. And how about you, Linda?
For me, I have two at least two, but very different experiences depending on what I'm doing. When I'm doing Reiki, I have a very clear sense of the body's trauma. I have done a healing where I could, I sensed the heart chakra as being very crispy and crumbly and not moving, and there where normally I would sense like petals, almost like the petals of a flower, energetic, of course, very very alive and very juicy. So word,
Juicy. I love that.
but it's the only word that fits. And in this individual, they were crumbly. They were very dry. They were not moving. They weren't even trembling, or they weren't moving at all. They were just very stiff and crumbly, and it felt very gray. It felt very gray. And 2 weeks later, this individual was diagnosed by a cardiologist as having probably, because they hadn't done the whole diagnostic thing, but just based on the symptoms, that the cardiologist thought that it was probably something called amyloid cardiosis, I believe, which is also known as stiff heart syndrome. And I thought at the time, okay, that is like so weird. But just doing a general scan of, like, without using Reiki, just doing a general scan of someone, I don't usually pick up anything physical unless I'm using Reiki, come to think of it. I haven't, yeah. It usually what I pick up is grief. Well, not grief. I keep talking about it, but it's because it's a lot of people have a lot of grief that they're just not releasing. Mostly I just pick up pain, Sometimes I can see it. Sometimes I can see, especially if I'm reading past lives, I can see you got shot in your left thigh, and I think you probably still have pain in your hip and thigh but that was the original cause of it, But that, you see, okay, so that brings me back to the whole ancestral part of it, because these ancestors or these past lives are not genetically related
No.
to the life that's currently being lived. Okay. So what's the method of transmission? I mean, that's like really a juicy question.
When we delve into scientific stuff like medicine, psychology, I don't think the answer is there, because there is more of where this world is looked at a bit as woo, right?
Yeah.
But I have delved into a field where I can feel, sorry guys, it might be so irritating and annoying, but my hair is just all over the place. I have dealt with a branch that talks about the woo and the science and is widely accepted. It's the quantum field.
Mm.
Yes.
Right? When we delve into quantum science, soul, energy, past lives, perception, reality, everything makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was, I think it was in one of the videos, the shows with yourself and Linda and Gerald, where I talked about Bernard Kastrup.
Yes.
He is actually an engineer who went through a phase of having his PhD in engineering and then was challenged that the ideas that he was doing were not philosophically backed. So he went and got his PhD in philosophy. So he's a double PhD. And that's why I kind of get his vibe, because why go and listen to hearsay when you can just go and study and get another degree and be the expert on it? And then people know that you're talking the real deal, right? So when he talks about soul in a very, without confusing our audience, he talks about the universe as one, as we all know, the Big Bang Theory and everything. But putting it into perspective, when that tiny little something had a big bang, everything fragmented, however wide, up, down, whatever shape, form it took, it is still parts of the universe that fragmented itself, correct? So when something fragmented itself, everything has pockets of energy that eventually once belonged as one whole. So you have your bit of energy, Diane has her bit of energy, I have my bit of energy. If we coalesced our form of energy, we become a bigger ball of energy, which still becomes a part of the universal energy, which makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like finding fragments of an exploded balloon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, talking about past lives and rebirth, according to the first law of thermodynamics, which is science, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's just converted, transmuted, alchemized from one form to another. Scientifically, we can give an example of, if I have a ball in my hand resting, it's potential energy. The minute I start putting potential into it, it's my chemical energy from the muscles, goes into the ball, becomes kinetic energy, goes up in the air, rests on the ground, falls down. While it is in touch with the air particles, there's thermal energy with the heat, sets down on the ground, sits down, it's potential energy again. No loss of energy, just transference, correct? When you talk about it spiritually, it's the exact same thing, which I'm sure you and Diane, you and Linda will be able to talk more on that. So if energy always exists and it doesn't get destroyed, what happens after death? The body has its own outer shell energy, right? because it's the surface level energy that we're talking about. But then the consciousness is an energy on its own, which, like, let's say it's the conscious soul. That energy doesn't get destroyed.
Yeah.
So when that energy takes on another pair of overalls as human body, you're bringing along the same energy. There is no transmission. It's just embedded. You've just carried it. You've put on a new set of overalls, and those overalls will probably have a different design, different fashion, different genetic trauma based on the ancestor of the family that you're getting born into. And then you come up with a whole set of different shadows. But then that trauma gets carried with you because it was imprinted in your soul's energy, not the body, physical energy. I'm not sure how I can describe physical scars as part of past lives or anything of that sort. I haven't gotten there yet. Maybe I'll get an answer.
I never have had an answer to that. And just
Yeah, my spirit guides told me about that. And this is something that I also say often, Dr. Pam, that coincides with what you're telling me, you're telling the audience. Like, energy doesn't get created nor destroyed. Our energy body from the very first incarnation is the same energy body that we carry right now. So each and every incarnation that we've had, we have that energy body. And so if there are any energetic traumas that we have, we also carry them over.
yes.
This is something that, again, my guides told me with regards to the physical stuff. Since we carry
Is
the
that what
same,
you call karma, though? Is that how
I
you?
don't call it karma.
No,
I just call it like trapped emotions from past lifetimes. But it's something that we can also carry over. Like, for example, we had a past life trauma or a trapped emotion that got stuck from an experience, like getting hit in the butt, for example, or getting hit on the shoulder with a gun or an arrow. There is an energetic imprint that is left in our energy body because of that experience. And so in our next incarnation, it might affect the physical body because they are intertwined. Our energy body and our physical body are intertwined. So it can affect our past lifetimes, can affect our physical body as well. At least that's how I understand it for now.
yeah.
But it's really fascinating that we come from different fields and our interpretations are kind of similar. Are they the same? That we have our own energy body that is immortal and it doesn't really break down or it's not created nor destroyed, as science would put it.
Yeah, I think the reason why we're able to have this discourse is mainly because, one, we're open to listening to the other person's perspective, which is not a lot out there, and the other is that even though there are two separate worlds, we're somehow able to bring it to one single lens and look through it, right? It's like I'm able to see the world that's on the other side, and you're able to see the world on our side. So we come at this middle ground, and then it's like standing in the valley of two mountains, one mountain being science and one mountain being spirituality. And when we're standing at that valley together, we look up and we can see both perspectives.
Yeah.
And somehow it makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
It sounds like a holistic approach,
yes.
like looking into like the mind and body,
Yes.
both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
And if you add a third element, mind, body, and spirit.
It's what I'm working on whenever I ask questions about my app. It is what I'm working on. The app is mostly bringing together the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the energetic or spiritual. I keep it depending on who is at the receiving end. But it means the same for me in my world. To explain it to the people, I keep the energetic and the spiritual as one. But it's very needed because, like when Linda talked about Reiki, I did just level 1. I'm yet to do level 2. But Reiki is scientifically backed.
Yeah.
especially for something as mild as headaches, right up to a palliative care for people who have chronic illnesses and cancer. You
Yeah.
see? So for me, whenever people talk about, do you have scientific proof and do you think that makes sense? I often explain to them that, when an infant is born, the infant has only one language, which is their language of communication is through tears, because they don't know any other way of communicating. Then they grow up, they learn a few words, and then and it makes a little bit of sense until they come to a point where they can speak and, fluently, and then we understand and have verbal conversation. But just because they didn't have the language to communicate, it did not mean they did not communicate. So ancient wisdom always communicated. Science is a language. Just because science came up with the rules of research and all of that, it doesn't mean that prior to the existence of science, everything needs to be rubbished.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say radio waves existed before we had radio.
Yes.
Yes.
We didn't know about them.
Yes.
We had no way of capturing them. But once we got a way of capturing them, then we could use them, and now we have, all kinds of radio and radar and Wi-Fi and all of this kind of stuff. But it existed before.
Yeah. It's just that if science hasn't proven something, doesn't mean that the ancient wisdom can be nullified. It just means that science needs to have a different approach, enhance its way of thinking and finding the truth, or we just create another language. But science has become the gold standard with proof, I know. However, we need to understand that science is a language. Science is a way of studying what already existed prior to science existing. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Science has just come along and it's putting pen to paper, facts to paper, and saying, this is how we understand possibly how things work, and we've replicated it in our labs. Therefore, we can safely say that it's true and genuine. If they can't, on multiple occasions, if they can't replicate it to have the similar outcomes, then they say, we cannot verify this. But does not mean that just because we can't verify it, that concept is wrong. And why is this a bit more confusing? And why does spirituality often not blend there? Is because, like we just talked, shadow differs from person to person. Values differs from person to person. Your own identical twin, if you had one, would have such a different way of living. How can you replicate it in a lab? How can the outcome be the same? Therefore, scientific research can never be successful at trying to understand energetic work or anything of that sort. But they're slowly getting there. So
a lot of these healings and energy happens in the quantum realm, and there are a lot of studies being done in science about the quantum field now. Jacqueline has a beautiful way of putting this. They didn't know what the stars are or where they were, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Absolutely. Or that the earth went around the sun. For a while they thought the sun went around the earth, right?
Yeah.
Did that affect the way the universe worked? No. The universe just existed as it was existing, and they were just like, go back to the drawing board, find out what's the real truth, and then come back again and tell us. It's just,
Yeah, what changed was just our understanding of things.
yes.
So
I hate to break up this fabulous conversation. And I want to let you all know that we'll be back in 2 weeks. The next episode of Into the Ether will continue this fascinating conversation with Dr. Pam. I want to encourage you all to go out and buy her book, Cracking the Happiness Code, A Practical Guide to a Happier Life. Please. And
I just want to make one little mention. If anybody thinks the word happy is going to put them off, I have at the very first chapter, before the even chapter is written, explain why the title. And I go on to say that happy is a very common term that children know, and children say, I'm happy, but this can be translated to your default state of being content, blissful, peaceful.
Beautiful.
So anything, however you translate it. So don't be put off by the title. Just give it a shot.
I thought it was a great title. I think it's fabulous. But I'm 6 years old, so you know.
That is true. That is true, Linda.
And I also want to let you all know that Dr. Pamela Stoodley has a website. You can go and take a look. There are some articles on there and more information about her and her background. So please take a look at her website. Okay, how did that come off? Was that me? Please go and take a look at her website as well.
Dr. Pam, you mentioned an app. Is it available now as well?
No.
Oh, it's something to look forward to.
Yes, it's still in development. And hopefully, maybe I can come into the community and tap into people who can collaborate, because it is going to be having layers of cultural element, bringing in the ancient wisdom, so that whoever uses the app speaks to them at a personal level from where they come from, rather than me bringing them to the scientific saying, do this, it's good for you. I want the app to come to them and say, how can I help you where you're at? So
I can
love that.
I'll be a guinea pig.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, we can be guinea pigs.
Donna's on the list too. Donna
Yes.
Marie.
Oh,
Yes.
I think that would be way too much fun. So everyone, thank you all so much for being here. I for this special edition of Into the Aether, and a huge heartfelt thank you to Dr. Pamela Stoodley for bringing her wisdom, clarity, and compassion to a topic that can feel overwhelming, but doesn't have to be. Shadow work isn't about digging through darkness or trying to fix ourselves. It's about meeting the hidden parts of us with gentleness, curiosity, and honesty, and letting those conversations soften us into wholeness. As you move through your week, keep it simple, stay grounded, take one compassionate step at a time. Thank you all for your presence, your questions, your openness. And we'll see you in the second part of this series in 2 weeks' time. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.